All right, so we're going to cover taste and smell, which are handled together because you perceive them together, and also they both involve chemoreception, so they are, good friends in all of this. Um, so they're both chemoreceptors, meaning that they sense chemicals in solution. Your taste is something that has 4 different types of receptors, and you can sort of blend them together um, and create a couple different more tastes, but there is very low rate of sort of sensation from your tongue, as opposed to your sense of smell. Your sense of smell is much more complex. You have a bunch of different smell receptors, and people can have a whole bunch of different olfactory senses. They complement each other, so particularly in taste, taste has a lot to do with smelling, but smelling doesn't have a ton to do with taste, but they do complement each other, and you perceive them together because they happen in the same sort of the same anatomical location as well. All right, so olfaction is what is the science word for your sense of smell. Your olfactory receptors are in the olfactory bulb, if you remember from dissecting your sheep brain. The neurons go through the cribriform plate. They have these long cilia, and then the chemoreceptors are at the top of your, sort of the cribriform plate or the nasal sinuses, or the nasal chambers. Because the chemoreceptor, the chemicals have to be dissolved in solution, you have to have some sort of moisture in your nose for this to happen. So you need to have like actual mucus, not too much mucus. I probably all had a cold bad enough that it blocked your nasal mucosa enough for you not to be able to smell, and you know how that feels. It mostly means that you can't taste anything. That's usually how that goes. So that's, generally speaking, it goes down, actually, so your chemoreceptors actually have to be activated. It's also why we feel like moisture activates smells. If you've ever had like a smelly rug, maybe your cat peed on your rug, and you thought that smell was gone, and then it got really humid, and you smell that smell again. Part of it is that your nasal mucosa works better, and your olfactory receptors work better when it's mucusy, or when the mucus is wetter. But it's also because moisture does help activate smells. So humidity is not good for smelly stuff. All right, so once you get those chemoreceptors firing, they transmit their information via the olfactory nerve, which is cranial nerve 1, and then it is interpreted inside the olfactory cortex of the brain. So here you go. Here's the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. Here's your olfactory bulb. The filaments of the olfactory nerve come down. You have all these supporting cells, but these are the olfactory receptor cells, and the actual olfactory receptors are in this mucus layer that is up in the top of the nasal chambers, so inside your nose. All right, taste buds are on your tongue for the most part. Some of them are on your cheeks, and some of them are on your soft palate. Remembering your soft palate is if you put your finger on your roof of your mouth, which you absolutely should not do because you should not put your fingers in your mouth. But if you did, you would feel your hard palate, which is made of your palatine bones. And then if you pushed your finger beyond that and you didn't gag, there is on the roof of your mouth, it becomes very soft. That's your soft palate. And that has some of its own taste buds on it. So the taste buds are one thing, and they are inside papillae of the tongue that we'll talk about in a second. All right, so on the tongue you have these projections called papillae. Papillae are little sticky outy things. They are either filiform, and those are, we'll go back and look at it. The filiform ones are on the sides and they do not have any taste buds. There are fungiform ones, which are in the middle of your tongue here. And then you have in the back these big ones that are the circumvallate ones. You can see the fungiform ones if you look at your tongue in the mirror, and you'll do that during your lab. And then the circumvallate, you really stick your tongue out and you can see you can see them. They're very distinctive. So there are 3 different types. The filiform ones are those sharp ones on the sides of your tongue, and these do not have a taste function. And the taste buds themselves are sort of deep in the sides of those papillae. We'll talk about that in a second. So the receptors are the gustatory cells. They have hair on long microvilli. They're very much like your they're very much like the olfactory receptors that we just talked about. And the hairs are stimulated by substances that are stuck in your saliva. You have 3 cranial nerves that are responsible for taste: the facial nerve, the glossopharyngeal nerve, and the vagus nerve. I would know both them, their names, and their cranial nerve numbers. So if you look at them, here's like a circumvallate one, but a fungiform is like that, but smaller. And if you look inside here, deep inside the circumvallate papillae are the actual taste buds. And they have a sensory nerve fiber, which is from one of those cranial nerves, and they go out to the taste bud structures themselves, which have some support cells called basal cells, and then the gustatory cells, which have the actual neurons on them. And then you have the gustatory hairs, and the gustatory hairs are the things that have the actual taste receptors on them. If you look at the structure, particularly of these circumvallate papillae, but a fungiform as well, the reason that taste, if you've ever had some bad taste in your mouth and it's so hard to get rid of, it's hard to get rid of because the saliva is like stuck down in there. And one of the best ways to get a bad taste out of your mouth is you could rinse it, or you could really like wipe your tongue off really well and then rinse, because then you're getting all that sort of the saliva that has whatever bad chemical it is that you're tasting out of there. Particularly like bitter tastes, you know, you get a bitter taste and it hangs out in your mouth for a long time. All right, so you have 4 different types of receptors. You have sweet receptors that taste sugars, saccharins, which tend to be man-made chemicals that can bind, and they bind very tightly to these sweet receptors. That's what makes them taste sweeter. And then some amino acids will also bind to sweet receptors. Acids, particularly things like, you think of things that are sour, like citrus fruits, lemons, limes, those are acidic and they bind to sour receptors. Things that you perceive as being bitter are things that are basic, like alkaloids. A lot of medications are alkaloids, and so therefore they are, and they bind to those bitter receptors. If you've ever tasted like a Tylenol or something, not a Tylenol, like an aspirin, they're all tend to be very bitter. And then your salty receptors bind to metal ions, for example, sodium. From salt would bind to your salty receptors. Clearly, sodium chloride table salt is the most of the saltiest of the salty receptors. So, fun facts about these, the developmental aspects. You taste, your sense of taste and smell are formed early in your embryonic development. So there is a lot of information about infants being able to, like, not infants, sorry, fetuses being able to taste, or what you eat while you're pregnant influences the tastes that your babies have, what they come out with. And this is also very true with, like, if you're breastfeeding, the food that you eat is the taste of that is expressed in your breast milk, and it can affect what taste your babies are acclimated to. Eyes are outgrowths of the brain. The eyes, babies see pretty well at a they're very nearsighted when they're born, and so they can see their mothers and their parents who are holding them, but they can't see very far away. And then their eyes develop as they develop through their first couple months. But all special senses are rudimental, like have like rudimentary function at a minimum at birth. All right, that is it for this lecture. There will be one more on hearing that you'll get later on.